Okay, welcome to Power Pivots, the podcast where we explore the stories behind the fundamental career shifts and changes that have made all the difference. I'm your host. I go by Hatu, and today we are joined by
Mannah Kallon.
Mannah. How you doing?
Doing really well. Great to talk to you, Hatu.
It's great to talk to you as well. It's really great to talk to you as well. I've seen your LinkedIn profile and kind of like been really curious about your journey. I thought it would be a great one that people could benefit hearing from, especially as people are interested in getting into tech, getting into software engineering. And I know you have an interesting path of how you got there. So I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, and I'm interested to share my story. I think this is going to be a lot of fun.
Awesome. Well, let's jump right into it. So for those who have joined us before, or for those who don't know, we jump into our PowerPoints. PowerPoints are 3 words or phrases that encapsulate you. Tell us a little bit more about who you are. So, Mannah, with that in mind, tell us a little bit about your PowerPoints.
Yeah, for my PowerPoints, I've definitely picked 3 words that I aspire to try and live every day. First one is principled. Second one is driven. And the third is honest.
Okay.
And they definitely overlap and braid into each other. So I think that the most important thing is to be principled. And when I say be principled, it means you have intention behind your actions. You are thinking about how you are going to be in the world and making sure that you are adhering to those ideas that you set up in advance. I think it's hard in real time to parse out all the different situations that you can get into. But if you have an idea of who you are as a human being and how you want to show up, and you've already made those decisions, it makes decision making a lot easier.
Okay.
And then that is backed up by being driven. Being driven is the action behind the intentionality, making sure you are following through on the decisions that you have pre-made, the way that you say that you're going to show up for people. And then third is being honest. And it's amazing to be honest with the people around you, but I think it's far more important to make sure you're being honest with yourself. Make sure you're taking the time to check in. Make sure you're taking the time to self-assess. Not necessarily doing it with judgment, finding ways to either put yourself down or maybe give yourself a false sense of confidence, but to really be honest about where you are in your journey, in your life, why things might have gone the way they might have gone, and how you might be able to improve going forward.
Awesome. Okay. Principled, driven, and honest. And they all interlink into the person that you are and kind of like the way that you want to lead your life. And I'm sure that also reflects in how you've been able to establish your career and how you show up in your career on a day-to-day. So I can't wait to get more into that. But, they say that the story is always told in hindsight, and hindsight is 2020. So with that in mind, Mannah, what would you say your hindsight story looks like?
I think my hindsight story has a lot to do with me giving myself permission to be myself.
Okay.
I grew up in a traditional immigrant household in that my parents had a very defined path for what they wanted me to be professionally. And that did not align with my internal understanding of who I am. And that created a lot of conflict, both internally and between me and them. And it was really hard for me to understand where they wanted me to go, and having this internal feeling of really wanting to be, I consider myself a creative, really wanting to express myself creatively, artistically in the things that I'm building, in the way that I present myself visually, with the hair, with the tattoos. Yeah. It took me a long time to kind of embrace my identity and give myself permission to say, that's okay. Like, this is who you are, and this is how I'm going to be successful in the world. And I think that that's probably the most important lesson that I learned, how to define success for myself. Don't let anyone else take that power away from you and tell you what it means to be a success, whether it's money, whether it's title, whether it's, prestige. Really think about what are the things that you want to do that kind of fulfill you, and make sure that you are always pursuing those.
Okay. So from that standpoint, you get to this point that you've understood yourself and that you've defined success for yourself. I guess from a career standpoint, what pathway did you take to be able to get there?
Yeah, so that was definitely an incremental path. I didn't come this far to come this far. I am a work in progress. This is not yet my final form. Mm-hmm. We are always working towards becoming the most ultimate version of ourselves. Mm-hmm. And the first thing I had to do was really, I went to the University of Michigan. I'm from New York.
Go
and I went
Bulls.
to University of Michigan. And the first thing that I really found there was I'm surrounded by these intelligent people.
Mhm.
And rather than just taking somebody else's, an elder, an ancestor, a family member's advice in terms of what path I should be pursuing,
Mhm.
these were the first people who told me really to ask the question why, and
Mhm.
like, what am I doing this for? And with that, I also had a lot of resources that I didn't necessarily have at home in terms of access to art studios, access to computers, access to different programs. And then outside of my classwork, I really just started to dive into these things that I found interesting. I might be dating myself a little bit, but I was playing around with a program called Macromedia Flash.
Mhm.
I had always been very much into animation, and having the opportunity to even if it was simple things like moving a box around the screen, really just found that super fascinating. Fast forward a bit, had some issues at home, had to leave school for a while, and I didn't know what I wanted to do professionally, but I knew that I really wanted a tight family structure if and when I had the opportunity.
Mhm.
So one of the things when I was watching TV, I would always look at the families on TV, and the thing I associated with being quote unquote a family was sitting around the dinner table and enjoying a meal together.
Mhm.
So knowing that, I wouldn't say actually I knew, but like had the inkling of wanting to be a creative and wanting to have that meal experience, I got into cooking. And that was my first really foray into professional life, was in a kitchen. Ended up opening up a restaurant, had that for a little while, was able to move on from that experience and then finish my college degree back at Michigan. And because the people at school had such an influence, I really wanted to continue that academia lifestyle
Mhm.
and went back to New York City to get a master's degree with the intention of moving on into academia and teaching philosophy. I joined a program called the New York City Teaching Fellows, which was an opportunity to work in classrooms. I was teaching in the South Bronx, in Harlem, working classrooms while earning my master's degree. And I will tell you, it was baptism by fire, right? Like I came into the classroom, kids are running wild, all sorts of different academic levels. And I didn't study education. So I needed a way to kind of give me a breath so I could work with the children over here while we're doing something constructive. So I used that experience with working with Macromedia Flash to build a Pac-Man math game. And that was what kind of showed me the power of technology and applied technology.
Mhm.
Fast forward a couple of years, started working for an ed tech company, and I was on the content creation side. I was making math lessons,
Mhm.
but it was my first time working with developers. And I recognized that what they were doing was what I was doing in my spare time, but
Right.
it was much more lucrative.
Yeah.
Came out to the West Coast, found an opportunity with a boot camp, was creating lessons for them as well. And this was kind of during the dot-com boom. Got in with a startup pre-IPO and went on the dot-com journey. It was a very eye-opening experience for many reasons. Learned code, learned the tech jargon,
Mhm.
drank the Kool-Aid, also experienced kind of the monoculture that was the tech world in San Francisco at that time, pushed back a good amount, and kind of came full circle to this is a world that I want to be a part in, but it is not ultimately going to define me. By serendipity and happenstance, ran into somebody who had a sister who was working at Riot Games and started a conversation with them, passed along a resume, and that's where we are today. Software engineer at Riot Games. Like I said, this is a work in progress, so I am not at the final place, but this is a good step in terms of getting towards a dream job.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. I love that. And your career, like I always say, is an amalgamation of the different jobs that you've held, and you've held quite a few of them here that are intertwined, but they all vary. And one of the biggest themes that I got from your story, right, is that you do it for yourself, right? You know that you're a creative at heart, and you look for ways to create and to be able to bring your authentic self into an experience through creation. And that's clearly what you've consistently done, right? From realizing that cooking is a passion and like you wanted to create a creative experience through that, and then going to academia or into education, right? And realizing that through creation, you're able to kind of help get students on track through like creating a math game. And then instructional design, you're creating again there. And then as an engineer, which a lot of people, sometimes don't equate to having a creative sense, but you are creating, you are developing, you're making something for whatever organization or application you need to, right? I think that one of the aspects that I really wanted to ask about, because that's a little bit of like a hard shift. Obviously, there's an interest there, right, from using like multimedia flash, and it can lead into development. But I want to talk about your boot camp experience, right? So tell us a little bit more about like what that was like. How it was able to really help you come into your own as a developer, and what maybe some of the pros and cons were of that experience.
Yeah. So for those who are unfamiliar, a boot camp, I did a coding boot camp.
Oh, yes.
Boot camp is an intensive program where you study a topic. Again, I did coding. I learned web development through the boot camp. And this thing that I will say about the boot camp is the same thing I will say about any educational experience. You get out what you put in. And if you can really leverage the opportunities that are in front of you and the resources, both in terms of instructors, in terms of your peers who are also have connections in the world that you are most likely trying to break into, not only that, just their ideas and creativity. A lot of people in boot camps come from a lot of different backgrounds, different ages, different professional experiences. And for someone who does something like create technology touches all parts of our lives. So what technology might a hairdresser be interested in, and how do you start solving those problems? What about a teacher in my case, or what about a retail app? And I think that was the biggest thing that I brought to my career, certainly early on, was really understanding a problem space and coming up with a technological solution to that problem.
Yeah.
Listening to your customer, listening to your end user, and understanding how my skills could be applied to those different situations.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. And one question that I have here, and I've been on the flip side of this, obviously, as a recruiter myself and technology recruiter for my career, is how you source through boot camps. Usually I see after people have gone through the boot camps or they're in the boot camps, I see like the final product. But what is that thought process? Talk us through like how you decide on which boot camps are suitable, which are not. Like what are some things that people should look out for if they're interested in pursuing an engineering or some kind of other technical path through using this kind of intensive?
Yeah, boot camps tend to be very focused on the result being employment. So I think the biggest thing to think about is what sort of connections are at the boot camp. What sort of connections do they have formally? If you look up their alumni in LinkedIn, what sort of companies do they have? And I think that those are the biggest things. Is really the boot camp experience itself is going to be largely driven by how you interact with the program. But the more important than any particular asset that the bootcamp has is the network that it gives you access to.
Perfect. And then after the boot camp, right? You went to a startup that was in ed tech, correct?
It was actually not an ed tech. It was a retail startup.
Oh, retail startup. Sorry, retail startup. How did you decide how did you, I guess, decide to go into that space? Like, what was the process of like finding the job afterwards and being able to utilize those skills? And then also, with the boot camps, obviously these things are not cheap. What is the work outside of what you're being taught with the instructors or within the confines of the camp? How was that process of finding the job, or was that process of finding the job afterwards?
Yeah, for me, there was always a parallel path. So while I'm doing the boot camp, while I'm doing the lessons, while I'm preparing for my job, at the time it was web development, while I'm doing all of that work on the side, I am tinkering. This is again, building on the experience in college working with Macromedia Flash. I am a gamer. I am making games. I am playing around with Unity. I am playing around with Unreal. I am playing around with Godot. And this is a way to strengthen my understanding of different technologies
Mhm.
and develop in a way that I am passionate about and that I find fulfilling. But again, this is a parallel path. I'm also looking at trends in the market, like what are companies that I think are going to be successful, have a product that I would either use or be willing to endorse. Especially at the time, there were so many apps, foot massages for your dog, and
Mhm.
all these things out there. But like, what do I think actually has some staying power?
Yeah.
And I think will produce a product that I could A, be proud of, and B, I ultimately think will be successful. And then kind of where those met is I like to make stuff that looks cool. Who has a really great design aesthetic? Who is really pushing the envelope or doing something interesting within the web space? But to be fair, like, who's going to hire me?
Yeah.
uh,
That's fair. Yeah.
yeah, sometimes a job is better than, no
Mhm.
job. So
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think one of the things that's important to underline there for what you have done, right, is that bias for action. When you're in the boot camp, sometimes there are a lot of people, it's kind of similar to school, right? Like when you finish class, there are people who are like, okay, well, I'm just going to rest on what has been said in the class and not do extra work. And there are people who are going to continue to develop the skills. And the difference is very clear at the end of the day, right? So if you're learning something in class and yes, you do the homework, but you're continuing to tinker, so you get out of it what you put into it, then that action that you're taking ends up being super important because it's going to make the difference when it's time for interviews, right? It's going to be very clear that you're not just going off of what you went over in the boot camp.
I also think the boot camp environment makes you hyper aware of that, right?
Mm.
You are in a place, you are with, let's just say, 30 other students.
Mhm.
You are all learning the same lessons.
Mhm.
You are all going to graduate on the same day. When
Yeah.
it comes to applying for a job, what's going to set your resume apart?
Mm.
What experiences do you bring to the table beyond just what the curriculum tells you?
Yeah, exactly. And you're always looking for the upper edge, like especially in this market too, when things are super competitive. Like you're always looking for things that will just kind of push you over, and especially in the pivot, right? Like if you're at a point that you're trying to pivot, yes, you're in that boot camp environment, but when you go out into the job market, you're competing against everybody else who is in the job market, right? So the pool is that much bigger. So how are you going to set yourself apart? Having true interest and passion for the company or the product that you're going to be working on is going to help you set yourself apart. Having extra skills, right, that jump off of the page. If there, everybody has the required skills, maybe going and getting some familiarity with the desired skills is going to help you set yourself apart as well. So just little things that continue to get you that edge help you just be able to get the job at the end of the day. Has Power Pivots inspired you to reevaluate your career path? If so, look into Power Pivots Career Coaching. Whether you're interested in career discovery, job description dissection, or interview prep, I take a tailored approach to helping you understand your ultimate career goals and get closer to them. Interested? Fill out the interest form at the bottom of the show notes for your free 30-minute consultation. For any questions, email hatu@powerpivots.co. That's HATU at powerpivots.co. As always, pivot powerfully. Talk to me a little bit about what it was like, and I'm always curious when people tell me about this, working in technology during the dot-com boom.
It was a crazy time. It really was. Came to San Francisco and you know kind of jumped into the tech world with both feet. So everything was kind of new and intertwined in this tech world. I will say that it taught me a lot about imposter syndrome. I am coming from a background, I am a chef, I am a teacher, I am in a place with these engineers making what I thought at the time were these amazing salaries. They're still amazing salaries. I'm just less intimidated now.
Yeah, you're in it.
Exactly. So the first thing, it was like, oh, I don't belong here. And this is where being honest really helped me through. A lot of people talk about imposter syndrome and they're like, yeah, I have it too, but like they don't really talk about how to deal with it. The way I dealt with it is like, what have I done?
Yeah.
I've done this boot camp. I created this website. I created this web app. I created, like, these are the pelts on my wall. I have done these things.
Mhm.
And the next step is to, let's just say, land the job, right?
Yeah.
I am honest about the steps I've taken to get there, and now I'm honest about the gap in between the thing I need to do and where I am now. I
Yes.
think that really helped me. I
Yes.
think it also helps me not be intimidated when I'm talking to people,
Mhm.
because while my experience might not all have been in tech, I have a plethora of experiences with leading a team, with being creative and solving a problem for a 12-year-old who maybe has trouble reading. I have all of these things that I bring with me to the tech world that are boons to the tech world, that maybe somebody who's gone through a more traditional path, they just haven't considered these different avenues. So those things really empowered me to move forward with confidence, move forward with intention, recognize the path forward was not going to be linear. A lot of applications,
Yeah.
a lot of rejections,
Yeah.
not taking any one of them particularly too seriously, understanding that all you need is a yes,
Yep.
and being confident that when the match was right, things would work out.
Yeah. You said a lot of great stuff there. One of the biggest points that I want to make sure is not lost there is, for a pivot, you need to be confident. You have to be confident. You have to be confident. It's fair and it's understandable to have imposter syndrome, but when you realize that other folks do not have it all together as you think that they may, and you actually are able to think of the transferable skills that you've built up in your other experiences, it makes it that much easier. Now, confidence is not lying to yourself, right? That honesty is a very critical part. And I talk to my clients about this all the time, my career coaching clients. It is very important to understand your skills, to understand the skills of where you're trying to go, and understand where the gap is, and then take action towards working to bridge the gap and alleviate that. That is how you're able to develop confidence in your ability to pivot. If you try and skate past it or skirt past it, which a lot of us are used to doing during the interview process, like just not talking about our weaknesses and talk more about our strengths, right? And try and hide or deviate from the lack of our ability to do something, then at a certain point that's just going to be discovered, right? You don't want to do that. You want to try and take these things head on. And yes, you want to focus on the skills that you do have, but you also want to try and work towards the ones that you don't, which I think you've done a great job of doing. And that helps build up that confidence as well, right? So I know that you've done a fair amount of independent development as well, right? So I want you to talk to me a little bit about that again, continuing to build on skills, continuing to take action. Talk to me about that experience and kind of how you ended up doing that.
Yeah, so working at a place like Riot, obviously we make games, and it is such a big company that at any given time, an individual is only touching one piece of the process. You're clearly aware of like a larger cross section and whatnot, but you're really only working on one piece. As an independent developer, you wear all the hats, and that's important to really being able to not only do the task, but understand the task that needs to be done. A phrase that we use at Riot all the time is finding the fun. And when you have the bird's eye view and you're looking at the gestalt of all the pieces that come together to make a game, you start to put together like where the fun could be. How am I programming, animating, injecting sound that really like makes this a compelling experience?
Mhm.
Then when I go to work, I have that background in mind when I am building a tool. And even though my day-to-day job is more how do I empower rioters to be better rioters, it is understanding all of the tools that they are putting into making fantastic experiences for our players, and how do I empower them to do those things. And I truly think that not only just the technical aspect of the programming or the animating, but how do gamers talk about games? How,
Mhm.
getting into spaces like Discord and
Mhm.
sharing prototypes or sharing work in progress and getting that feedback in real time on something like that you're super knowledgeable about
Mhm.
transfers to understanding how folks might be looking at something that has a much larger footprint. And I think it makes you a more well-rounded individual,
Mhm.
and you start to see around corners because you're not just looking at a single aspect, but you're considering the whole project.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. And I guess how have you been able to do that? So with indie development, like, are you doing this for clients? Are you doing this kind of just be able to test out what the response is from the user base or like the gaming community? What are some of the ways that this translates for you? And ultimately, how does it feed into some of the work that you do at Riot?
Yeah, so I make games because my favorite thing in the world to do is make games.
Yeah.
I love it. I call my studio Paper Sword Studio after a game my brother and I made up in the basement of our house with we rolled up newspapers, and that experience when we were maybe 8 to now much older than 8, not going to put a number out there.
No need.
I love it. And I love the creation, I love the ideation, I love being part of the community. One of the things I think also helps a lot is I love games enough to be critical of them. This again goes back to the honesty. There's no perfect project out there.
Yeah.
Think about what exists and what are the things that you might do to make it better. Or yeah, how do we tweak this? If only. And I think that those conversations are super healthy, especially in a creative space, because there's not going to be a magic switch where everyone is going to love everything about a project. You appeal to different people. You can find ways to bring people in, new players, existing players. I think that passion is helpful in any sort of endeavor where you are making something for other people. How does that translate into work that we do at Riot? So playtesting. When we're playtesting a game, I'll playtest a game for a different team. Oh, this was cool. I played this game where they had this UI element that maybe you would think about incorporating, or a control scheme like I noticed that you set it up to do this. What if people are more comfortable with this different button layout? Would
Mhm.
that impact your game? So you're just always thinking about different ways that you can present the best possible product for a potential player.
Awesome. Cool. So, Matt, if you could go back and give yourself any kind of advice, right? What advice would you give yourself pre-pivot? And then what is some advice that you give yourself or you talk to yourself about right now that helps you get through the days?
Yeah. So before I answer that first question, I'm gonna tell a little story, and that story is how to train a flea.
Okay.
So if you're not familiar, fleas are insects that can jump super duper high, like 50, 80, 100 times their body height, right? And that's what they do to move from place to place. They'll jump. If you put them in a jar with a lid, they will jump and hit the lid of that jar. And obviously that hurts them. When you take them out of that jar, they have the experience of hitting that lid. So rather than jumping to their full potential, they will now cap themselves right below where that lid was. So
Mm,
they will train themselves to undershoot their potential. If I had to give myself advice, it would be sometimes growth is painful.
mm,
Sometimes the road forward is just wrought with unfortunate circumstances. Endure that. But when you're done, make sure that you are showing up 100%.
mm.
Don't let the bad experiences teach you to be any less than yourself.
Cool. Excellent. I usually ask for parting words of wisdom, but you just gave us some words of wisdom right there. I appreciate this so much, man. And you have no idea. But thanks so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate you. And you know what? I'll give you the chance. If you have any other parting words that you would like to tell folks that are looking to make a pivot similar to yours? You've already given us so much, but any last words of what you'd like to say?
Yeah. The last thing I'd say to folks is don't be afraid to reach out to people who are doing things that you want to do. There are so many people, myself included. I mentioned that I'm passionate about games. I'm probably equally passionate about helping, especially young people, find opportunities, explore their passions. And I am not alone in that. Through social media, not everyone's going to respond. Don't get offended if you send a message and they don't write back, but don't be afraid, because there are people who will not only give you some insight, but if you work with them, they will open up doors for you. And a recommendation goes a long way, and you will learn a lot more from those conversations than you possibly imagine. So reach out to folks and follow your passions.
Well, there you have it, y'all. There you have it. I'm glad that I'm glad that I didn't cut it short and I asked you about the words of wisdom. Mannah, thank you so much for spending some time with us.
It was a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. And thank you all for joining. Please remember to like and subscribe for more. Most importantly, pivot powerfully. Be well, everyone.